I'm going to separate this video into two, probably. There's something about that abomination of desolation and the image that is set up to the Antichrist by the false prophet that is very important, but it was something that God had not revealed to me. Now, the abomination of desolation is demonstrated in the book of Ezekiel. As Ezekiel is taken through the temple, he's told at the very beginning of the chapter that he's going to see the idol that provokes to jealousy. By the end of his tour through the temple, he's shown it. So we don't have to be confused about what it is. But see, everything that God establishes in the physical, he's establishing in order for us to understand the fulfillment of it in the spiritual. By the end of the chapter, you see that the women are the women are mourning the god Tammuz. The men are bowing down to the sun in the east. Well, the god Tammuz is both a fertility god and a sun god, and his image is the cross. And the cross is that image, or what the world would call a symbol, but it's an image of counterfeit Christianity. The world would say, this is the symbol of Christianity. No, it's not. Because a symbol and an image are the same darn thing. We were told not to set up an image. We were told not to set up an image and bow down and kiss it, which is exactly what people do with the cross. It is an image, and it represents counterfeit Christianity. In Revelation 13, we're told that the false prophet is going to set up an image in honor of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is the kingdom of counterfeit Christianity. John told us that the Antichrist was already in the world. You got to have a Christ in order to have an Antichrist. The Antichrist is the spirit of Satan. And he told us many Antichrists have come. The book of Daniel, chapter 2, chapter 7, chapter 11, Revelation 13, Revelation 17, detail who that Antichrist is. God gave us a word he wants us to understand. It's not a mystery. Only a mystery to those who don't sit in his counsel, don't listen to what he has to say, and don't believe that he can give the wisdom to understand the word he gave. Only a mystery to those who follow after the delusions of man, do not sit and listen to the Spirit of God as they're reading the word and feast on his word and pursue his heart. The Antichrist was begun with counterfeit Christianity, which started with the Catholic Church, and it continues in the prostitutes that bore out of her. No one should say that Protestantism, what is that? It's Christianity. It's not Christianity. They continued in her prostitutions. They hate her, and yet they don't even realize that they continue in her prostitutions to the world, because Easter and Christmas are not biblical holy days. I don't care what the King James Version or the translators of the King James Version put in the Bible. The origin word is Passover, and it's observed in a very different way. There are not Christian holidays and Jewish holy days. That's ridiculous. Christianity is the fulfillment of what God established in being a Jew. A Jew is one who is circumcised in heart. If you are a true Christian, you are a spiritual Jew. Jew really is not an ethnicity. Which ethnicity would it be, guys? Russian? Polish? I mean, there are Jews of all ethnicities. So what God established in the Bible was those who descended from Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. And then in the New Testament, when Jesus extended salvation to the Gentiles, to all nations, Peter let us know that there was no favoritism between Jews and Gentiles. Those who have the favor of God are those who do the will of God. Paul let us know that not all who are descended from Abraham are Abraham's children. Not all who are descended from Israel, Jacob, not a land in the Middle East. Not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Not all who are Jews outwardly are Jews inwardly. A Jew is not one who is circumcised physically, but spiritually in the heart. So there's a massive delusion that has been set up in counterfeit Christianity that Israel is some land that, by the way, in the Middle East was established in 1948. When was the Bible established, guys? That's not Israel to God. God has defined who Israel is. Israel are his people. Otherwise, Gentile Christians are chopped liver. So there is this incredible delusion that has been set up mostly in the United States, and in fact has largely been created in the United States, perpetuated in the United States, and kept going. Why is that? Because I've demonstrated for you in biblical prophecy that the United States is the false prophet. Now, as the false prophet, there are all kinds of things that the United States testifies to, because that's what prophets do, don't they? Prophets have some sort of a doctrine or a gospel, or they're prophesying, or they're claiming to be speaking the word of the Lord, and the narrative that happens in the United States is, this is the promised land, we are the chosen people, we are the Christian nation, they are the Jewish nation, and we need to support everything they do, even if what they're doing is totally in conflict to the word of God, and they're exploiting our stupidity and our rejection of truth. We need a combination of church and state, right? Christian nationalism, that's part of the prophecy of the false prophet, just keeps testifying to this Antichrist. Now, let me tell you what happened the first time the Antichrist rose. Oh, there was a first time. Yes, there was. Revelation 17 tells us that it was, now is not, will rise again to go to its destruction. This is from the perspective of John, who was in the sixth kingdom in the vision, not from the perspective of John living in biblical times. It was from the perspective of John as he was in that vision. And he was in the sixth kingdom, which was atheistic communism. So Papal Rome had already fallen. Napoleon had already taken down Papal Rome. Okay, so the Antichrist is Papal Rome and the prostitutes that bore out of her. Essentially, it is the kingdom of counterfeit Christianity, counterfeit religion. The first time that the Antichrist rose in Papal Rome, they were slaughtering Christians. They were torturing them and taking away their kids and killing them. No way to really sugarcoat that. That's what happened. Feeding them to wild animals, sawing them in half, burning them at the stake, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. No reason to think it's going to be any better the second time it rises. I don't know what anybody's thinking with this pre-tribulation rapture nonsense. But there's going to be some tribulation before Jesus comes, and God's people are going to be here for it. Otherwise, who would they be doing it to? This idea that Israel is land in the Middle East is very key to these end times. I did not realize this. I did not realize it until today. God's been calling me to research the false prophet, which I have researched the false prophet. I have been studying end times for a while now, but he was calling me into a deeper study, and I had no idea why. I thought it was really going to be about, specifically about the false prophet. I didn't realize how he was going to put this picture together and help me to understand that image a little bit better. So you should be able to see it, because there's already legislation going into place where you can't say anything or you're considered an anti-Semite. There's already a gag order coming through. Now, Biden doesn't really have the strength to be able to execute the Antichrist system. He just doesn't. He's a flippity flopper. He doesn't stand for anything except probably what's going to make him money. But Trump will, and he will go into office next year. God help you if you're celebrating that, because what he will be doing is pushing along this Antichrist system. If you are celebrating that, you're in it. You are in the Antichrist, and if you don't come out, you will not be saved. Not only will you not be saved, but in eternity, the smoke of your torment will rise forever and ever. So you had better take a listen. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to separate this into a couple different videos, because this is probably going to get quite long. I also ask you to recognize that I've been telling you for the last 2 years that I'm going to die for what I'm doing. I know that I'm going to die for what I'm doing. You should be able to see it a little better now. At least by the end of these couple videos, you should be able to see that what I'm talking about will result in my death. And so if that's the case, if I am willing to stand here and say, this is what's going to happen, and I know I'm going to die for what I'm saying, it should mean something to you. It should mean enough to you, if you love God, to go back to him and ask him if what I'm saying is true. It doesn't matter if you like the message, because no one's ever liked the message that God's servants speak. In fact, Ezekiel was told when he was called to be a watchman, you are to speak the words that I tell you to speak, whether they listen or they fail to listen, and they're not going to listen to you because they don't listen to me. That was said by God himself. If you consider yourself a person who loves God, take to heart what I'm saying. At least take it to him. There's a short documentary that I came across the other day, actually, on YouTube, and usually I don't listen to documentaries or what people really have to say. I'm very, very selective is what I want to say about that. So I will consider it, but I consider it with the Holy Spirit and make sure that what I'm listening to is true, and that's how I discern it. And I don't listen to it from the perspective of somebody else telling me what to think. I listen to it from the perspective of, Lord, what do you want to show me about biblical prophecy? And there is a lot to learn about biblical prophecy in this documentary. The documentary is called How America Created Benjamin Netanyahu. It's a short documentary, and it's on the channel History of Elections. I'm just going to read from the transcript. So it's possible that this might get quite long, but it's a very interesting documentary, and I think it's worth listening to. In all of American history, only 2 foreign leaders have addressed a joint session of Congress on at least 3 occasions. One was Winston Churchill during and after the Second World War, and the other is Benjamin Netanyahu, the longest-serving prime minister in Israel's history. Okay, please forgive me because there's literally like no proper punctuation or capitalization, so I'm trying to figure out, okay, where does a sentence end and where does it begin? It's just the nature of the transcript. Okay, so Benjamin Netanyahu, the longest-serving prime minister in Israel's history. He is the second foreign leader that has addressed a joint session of Congress. And he gave his first speech to Congress in 1996 as the newly elected youngest prime minister in Israel's history. He received a warm reception from both sides of the political aisle. He was given a standing ovation when he pledged that in the next 4 years, he would begin the long-term process of gradually reducing U.S. economic assistance to Israel. Has that happened, guys? I don't see a decrease in the U.S. giving them funds. That was in 1996. There's only been an increase. So he's already a liar. He pledged that in the next 4 years, he'd begin the long-term process of gradually reducing U.S. economic assistance to Israel. While it was all smiles and tears during the public spectacle in front of Congress, Netanyahu's veneer of cordiality disappeared in a private meeting held afterward with President Bill Clinton. Netanyahu exhausted the U.S. president by giving a long and unsolicited lecture about the nature of Arabs, causing a fed-up Clinton to later remark privately, who does he think he is? Who's the explicitive superpower here? Okay, so Clinton was not amused. It's pretty arrogant, pretty bold to do that, to lecture someone who's actually giving you funds. Netanyahu's last address to Congress was in 2015, just weeks before the legislative elections in Israel, in which he would be reelected to serve under term as prime minister. This time, the invitation to address Congress came not from U.S. President Barack Obama, but from Republican House Speaker John Boehner. The Israeli prime minister took the opportunity to get directly involved in a partisan war that was taking place at the time between the U.S. Democrats and Republicans siding with the GOP in the House. He publicly denounced the Iran nuclear deal President Obama was then in the process of negotiating. Without saying it directly, the Israeli prime minister may have just as well have proclaimed to the collective body of U.S. lawmakers that he could do diplomacy better than their own president. Still, Netanyahu was courteous enough to thank the United States for its generous military assistance this time. However, he didn't bother to renew his original pledge to reduce Israelis' reliance on U.S. aid. In fact, Netanyahu was all too happy to accept the $38 billion military aid package to Israel signed by President Obama. Whether lecturing Clinton on Arabs or undermining Obama's diplomatic efforts, Netanyahu walked through the U.S. halls of power as if he owned the place. He knows he can depend on the stalwart base of pro-Israel lobbyists, and he has become so self-assured that he can even manipulate and control U.S. foreign policy. I know what America is, Netanyahu once said to a group of Israelis in 2001 when he apparently didn't know he was being recorded. America is a thing you can move very easily. Move in the right direction. They won't get in the way within the U.S.-Israel alliance. Netanyahu does see himself as the one holding the cards, and his high opinion of himself may not be completely unwarranted. There has been serious scholarship that has argued that Israel, or at least the pro-Israel lobbying groups working on behalf of the interests of Netanyahu, are in fact the primary drivers of U.S. foreign policy. For instance, in the book, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy, 2 leading political science scholars, John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt argue that, quote, the overall thrust of U.S. policy in the region of the Middle East is due almost entirely to U.S. domestic politics, and especially to the activities of the Israel lobby, end quote. Mearsheimer and Walt go as far as to say that even the 2003 Iraq invasion was, quote, motivated in good part by the desire to make Israel more secure, end quote. They point to the role of the small band of conservatives with close ties to Netanyahu's Likud party within the George W. Bush administration in propelling the U.S. into a war with Iraq. However, there are other critics who downplay the impact of the Israel lobby's influence in shaping U.S. foreign policy and who believe that it is in fact the United States that controls Israeli policies and not the other way around. Something to consider as we're looking at this narrative play out in media, guys, because it seems to be that the narrative is, oh, we don't want to get involved. We don't want to get involved. Here's some bombs. Oh, we don't want to look at like the bad guys. Here's some aid while we bomb you. That way we can what? Play both sides during an election? Are we supposed to just ignore the fact that aid is being sent to people who are being bombed with bombs sent by us? How do you send a gift to someone whose blood is on your own hands? That's lunacy. Some of Israel's sworn enemies take this position. For instance, I'm so sorry if I don't speak these names right, and I don't even know if they're spelled right in the transcript. Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Lebanese paramilitary organization and political party Hezbollah, was recently asked in an interview if the U.S. would be accountable if Israeli strikes Iran, and Nasrallah had this to say. Ooh, listen to this. This gave me chills. So this raises a serious question: who in fact calls the shots within the U.S. and Israel's quote-unquote special relationship? What's the truth of the matter? Does Israel dictate U.S. foreign policy, or is it in fact the U.S. holding sway over Israel's policies? Certainly on the surface level, it seems that Israel is the one with all the leverage, given that its prime minister apparently has the latitude to berate U.S. presidents and still receives billions in foreign aid. But the truth of the matter is that Benjamin Netanyahu himself is an American creation. Netanyahu's political journey began in the United States. He became prime minister of Israel by Americanizing the politics of Israel. And while he may have insulted U.S. presidents from Clinton to Obama and made himself a headache to Joe Biden as he seeks re-election, Netanyahu is still a product of the United States. In a sense, he can be compared to a Frankenstein monster, and I think that's absolutely right, compared to a Frankenstein monster creation of American political institutions that the U.S. may now have lost control over. Okay, so then he has this clip to play, so I'll go ahead and play it for you.
Please welcome the former Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. And I know when Israeli politicians come to the United States, it usually means they're trying to get their old job back.
No, actually, it doesn't, because America is of interest to us, whether in opposition or in government. America is important for everyone.
But you do want your old job back?
Yes, I do.
Well, that's the kind of honesty we don't have here in America.
While he was born in Israel, Netanyahu grew up in the 1960s with an American upbringing. He graduated from Cheltenham. I'm not even saying that right. It's probably not even spelled right here. High school in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Ben, as he was called by his American friends, later attended MIT and Harvard, in the late 1970s. He worked for the Boston Consulting Group, where he would make a lasting friendship with future Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney. Initially, when Netanyahu returned to Israel with a desire to build a political career, his American upbringing was a liability. He was seen as something of a carpetbagger and not a true Israeli. He was still quote-unquote Ben and not yet quote-unquote Bibi. But in due time, Netanyahu's fluency and command of the English language, as well as his understanding of American culture, would end up working to his advantage. As the U.S. and Israel's diplomatic relationship grew closer and closer, Netanyahu found ways to use his background to great advantage, paving the way for his ascendancy within Israel politics. What was a liability at first turned out to be his greatest asset. Netanyahu got his chance to explore his Americanized background in building his political career in the 1980s when he served as Israel's ambassador to the UN stationed in New York City. Netanyahu deepened his know-how and abilities, especially when it came to the all-important skill in navigating the U.S. media landscape. He soon became a fixture on American TV screens. His regular appearances on ABC's Nightline with Ted Koppel solidified his role as the program's go-to quote-unquote terrorism expert. Netanyahu also appeared many times on CNN's Larry King Live, which at the time was one of the network's flagship programs. On a scale of 1 to 10, as a great guest, he's an 8, Larry King once said of Netanyahu. Okay, so you hear this, that he became their terrorist expert. So, AKA, he became the narrative maker of Arabs being terrorists. Larry King goes on to say if he had a sense of humor, he'd be a 10. While being a frequent guest on these U.S. news shows, Netanyahu learned how easy and effective it was to misdirect the attention of American viewers. He learned how to play fast-moving news cycles to create distractions that would conceal Israel's most controversial policies from public scrutiny, and he became a master of distraction and used these skills to shift the American gaze away from Israeli action. Netanyahu was rather open about his strategy and made arguments that Israel should capitalize on events that distracted the world. In 1989, for instance, after the Tiananmen Square massacre, Netanyahu wrote an article saying that, quote, Israel should have exploited the repressions of the demonstrations in China when world attention focused on that country to carry out mass expulsions among the Arabs of the territories, end quote. This guy's a psychopath. Additionally, during slower news cycles or when there were no major world events that could camouflage the plight of the Palestinians, Netanyahu still found ways to come up with his own distractions, and at times he did this with great succession. In May 1990, for example, Netanyahu, who was in a meeting with American Jewish leaders who were concerned that the expansion of illegal settlements in East Jerusalem was creating a bad look for Israel, Netanyahu conceded by saying, you're right, it's a big problem for us now, but he added, it'll blow over in a week. There's a much more bigger problem that won't go away. Saddam Hussein is in the Middle East and Israel's number one problem. The implication, of course, was that illegal settlements would have to take a backseat to more pressing problems. What is remarkable about Netanyahu's handling of the concerns of American Jewish leaders was that he actually had no specific knowledge of the particular threat. By citing Saddam Hussein, he was just throwing a random dart at the dartboard, hoping that it might hit the mark and create enough concern to distract attention from what Israel was doing to the Palestinians. And this particular attempt at distraction was serendipitous, as it just so happened to be true. Just a few months after Netanyahu proclaimed that Saddam Hussein was the number one problem, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Netanyahu's wild guess helped cement his place within the American media as the foremost terrorism expert. They loved to interview him, and Bibi delivered. He was a master at playing with the American audiences, and he was a showman who understood the power of images during the Gulf War. For instance, he persuaded a CNN reporter to interview him with gas masks on. Photos showed Netanyahu smiling under the mask, almost giddy at the effect this bit of spectacle would have on the American public in generating sympathy for Israel. The absurdity of the stunt even caused Netanyahu to state the obvious. I must say, this is the darndest way to do an interview, he said. What it does show, however, is the threat that Israel faces. I cannot tell you when, I cannot tell you how, but Israel will defend itself. The U.S. media was particularly generous to Netanyahu. They often went even further than the Israel media to defend his reputation, even during the lowest points in his political career. It would be the American, not Israeli media, that will throw Netanyahu a lifeline. And one of the most egregious cases of this came right after the assassination of the Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, in 1995. In the early 1990s, the Israeli Prime Minister, Rabin, signed the Oslo Accords to begin the peace process with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO. Netanyahu, who was at the time the leader of the right-wing Likud party, attacked Rabin for signing the accords. He compared the arrangement to the 1938 Munich Agreement, in which the British government ceded parts of Czechoslovakia. to Hitler's Germany. You are worse than Chamberlain, Netanyahu said to Rabin in the Israeli Knesset. He endangered another nation, but you are doing it to your own nation. Netanyahu regularly appeared at anti-Rabin rallies as the right-wing protesters burned effigies of Rabin. They shouted, "Death to Rabin," and with blood and fire we will banish Rabin. The crowds even started to harass Rabin outside his residence. They went so far as to target Rabin's wife, Leah, taunting her with shouts like, "You will be strung up like Mussolini and his mistress." The protests were so extreme, the other leaders within Netanyahu's Likud party became squirmish and abandoned the rallies, but not Netanyahu, who continued to show up and stay at anti-Rabin protests. He did not flinch and continued to make speeches, adding further fuel to the flames. After Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by a right-wing extremist, everyone within the Israeli media knew the responsibility Netanyahu bore in creating the climate of hate and fear that led to the death of their prime minister. At Prime Minister Rabin's funeral, the widowed wife, Leah, shook hands with various dignitaries there, but she refused to greet Netanyahu. Days later, PLO chairman Yasser Arafat also came to console Leah Rabin in her home, but Netanyahu was asked not to come. For a time, it seemed Netanyahu would pay the price for his hardline positions as his numbers took the nosedive in the polls for the upcoming general election. But as his domestic numbers sank, it was the U.S. media that saved Netanyahu. A week after the murder of Rabin, ABC's Nightline ran a special program featuring various Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu and Rabin's widow, Leah Rabin. As audacious as it was to put both Rabin's widow and the man who had participated in rallies that called for his death on the same program, Ted Koppel even went further and posed the question to Leah Rabin that no member of the Israeli media dared to ask. Why, Koppel wanted to know, has she greeted Arafat warmly but refused to shake Netanyahu's hand in Israel, where Netanyahu's complicity in Rabin's death? It was common knowledge Leah Rabin's snub was understood for what it was, a denunciation of Netanyahu for his role in stoking right-wing hatred for her husband. Koppel's question turned a widow's grievance into an accusation. She was the one being irrational, and Bibi was the true victim. Unbelievable. That is so sick. Abetted by Koppel's question, Netanyahu felt confident enough to tell viewers later in the program that the tax on him for his role in Rabin's death was McCarthyism at its purest. By furnishing him with TV appearances like these, the U.S. media propped up Netanyahu in ways that could not be expected from the Israeli media. In turn, this conquest of the American airways and halls of power eventually elevated his domestic credentials. His poll numbers improved, and just a year after Rabin's death, he became the youngest prime minister in Israel's history. Okay, then he's got a clip of Donald J. Trump.
And we moved the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. That's for the evangelicals. You know, it's amazing with that. The evangelicals are more excited about that than Jewish people. That's really, right?
That's because these fake evangelicals are stupid. They believe in a gospel that is not the gospel, and they're being exploited by Zionists. I mean, this is crazy. Long before Netanyahu entered the political scene, support for Israel within the United States used to be a fairly liberal cause throughout the 1960s and 70s. Most American Jews and Zionists were ostensibly left-leaning Democratic voters and aligned more closely with the labor Zionists, such as the Israeli Prime Minister Ben-Gurion or Golda Meir. And the right-wing Likud party had little base of support within the American Jewish community, but during the 1980s, just around the time Netanyahu served as Israel's UN ambassador, the pro-Israel lobby in the United States shifted from the left to the right. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a PAC which used to be liberal-leaning, started to court Republican donors who would support them in their opposition to the Oslo Accords. The Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations also drifted to the right with the hiring of a hawk named Malcolm Holing as chief executive, and right-wing Christian Zionists started to get involved in the action to lobby on behalf of Israel, as well as with the formation and expansion of Christians United for Israel. Okay, so here you have the rise of John Hagee. Netanyahu found himself in the right place at the right time, just as the transition was taking place. As the conservatives started to take over the pro-Israel lobby, Netanyahu was able to form a powerful donor base, and this base was instrumental in funding his successful campaign to become Prime Minister of Israel. Malcolm Holing of the Conference of Presidents of a major American Jewish organization, introduced many wealthy donors to Netanyahu. Bibi also became friends with Republican businessman Ronald Lauder, who brought Netanyahu into contact with other big donors, including Donald Trump. Another benefactor was billionaire Charles Kushner, who sometimes hosted Netanyahu in his home, where the future Israeli prime minister slept in the childhood bedroom of Charles' son, Jared Kushner, who had later become the son-in-law and senior advisor to President Trump. And just as he was courting conservative donors in the U.S., Netanyahu also made contact with various conservative operatives. He hired GOP consultants to help him hone his political skills. With their assistance, he brought Republican-style campaigning into the Israeli political landscape. Sorry, guys, the lack of punctuation here just makes it really difficult to read. In the early 1990s, Netanyahu hired a famous GOP polling expert, Frank Luntz. This was followed by the 1996 election that first made Netanyahu prime minister for this successful campaign. Netanyahu also hired Republican guru Arthur Finkelstein, a former advisor for several successful campaigns, including those of President Nixon and Reagan. By his own admission, Finkelstein's proudest achievement over a decades-long career of running conservative campaigns was turning the word liberal into a pejorative. For Netanyahu's 1996 race, Finkelstein crafted sleek American-style tack ads that had previously never been seen in Israeli politics. Netanyahu's first term as prime minister lasted from 1996 to 1999. A decade later, when he ran again for prime minister, he once more turned to the U.S. strategist. For a successful comeback in 2009, he hired a Republican strategist named John McLaughlin to shape his messaging. McLaughlin would also go on to work as a polling expert for President Trump, but perhaps no GOP figure has been as influential in maintaining Netanyahu's power as the American casino owner Sheldon Adelson, who before his passing in 2021 was the largest single donor to the Republican Party. Netanyahu and Adelson were especially close, speaking on the phone at least 160 times between 2012 and 2015. The impact Adelson had on Israel cannot be overstated. He spent millions of his own money to promote Netanyahu. One of the ways he did this was by funding Israel's most popular newspaper, Hayom. Critics have nicknamed the Hayom as Bibi Tom for its peddling of patent propaganda on behalf of the right-wing Likud party. And while the newspaper doesn't make a profit since it is distributed free of charge, it served as a useful platform for the right-wing American billionaire Adelson to influence Israeli politics from afar. What's especially curious about Netanyahu's relationship with the Republican Party, however, is that the majority of American Jews are actually aligned with the Democratic Party, and while Netanyahu claims to represent international Jewry, his largest base of support within the United States doesn't come from Jews. It comes instead from Christian Zionists. These are the mostly white American evangelicals who adhere to the belief that God gave Israel to the Jews. Okay, let's stop for a minute. The word says that Israelites, there were Israelites before God ever brought them into a land, guys. And if there were Israelites before God ever brought them into a land, then we got to be talking about something else other than land. He does refer to us as land in Scripture. But you have to remember that they were brought into a land, which, by the way, was not called Israel. You would call the land of a particular tribe by the name of that tribe. This is the land of this tribe. This is the land of that tribe. This is the land of Israel. Do you understand that language? But they were expelled from the land for disobedience. And they're not supposed to, God's people are not supposed to inherit the land until the resurrection. Jews who are speaking about this in Israel are being pummeled in the street. The truth is not welcome. There was no land called Israel. There was a land of Israel that belonged to the Israelites until they were expelled from that land. Here's why this matters. Because people like John Hagee are profaning the word of God, are profaning the name of God in perpetuating this propaganda, so that people look at Christians and they think that we're stupid because they don't know the difference between counterfeit Christianity and true Christianity. They don't know that what is being spread by counterfeit Christianity is heresy. They don't understand that it is not okay to just stand by and be like, oh, we just support everything these people do. We have no common sense about what is wrong and what's right. Why do people hate us, guys? Why do people hate Christians? Why is God's name being profaned? Because these are mostly white American evangelicals who adhere to the belief that God gave Israel to the Jews. In fact, polls showed that this Bible-based, no, it's not Bible-based, it is delusion-based, but he says Bible-based conviction is stronger by a factor of 80 to 40% among white American evangelicals than it is among American Jews. You know why? Because they know better. They know that this is not true. There are some who are exploiting this. The Zionists are exploiting the stupidity of these Christian Zionists. And it grieves me to even call them Christian, because they're not. Meanwhile, the largest pro-Israel advocacy group in America, with over 10 million members, is also not a Jewish-led group. It is Christians United for Israel, led by the evangelical pastor John Hagee. In his book, Jerusalem Countdown, A Warning to the World, John Hagee makes the extremely anti-Semitic claim that Adolf Hitler was a half-breed Jew sent by God as a hunter to persecute and drive European Jews towards the only home God ever intended for the Jews in Israel. And yet Netanyahu is not at all repulsed by this extreme anti-Semite who literally justified the Holocaust. Okay, let's pause there for just a moment. God sends everything, okay? So he sends everything. I disagree with the person who is doing this video on this point right here. I fundamentally disagree. God sends everything. He sent my pain and suffering, and he's surely sent yours. He has sent it for his purpose, and he has sent these things in order to fulfill what he's doing. But I've explained to you on this channel why God sent that. He sent it because Jews who had gone to Germany, or who had gone to Europe, Germany specifically, were reforming God's word. And they were reforming God's word to science in a movement called Wissenschaft des Judentums. Okay, so this was occurring in Germany. They were reforming God's word, not only reforming God's word, but making him bow down to science, the very field that has always been witchcraft, and that now, at that point in history, was saying there is no creator. So that's exactly what God said he was going to do in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. Does that make me an anti-Semite? No. It is a basic fact. If you believe in God, that is a basic fact, because that's what he said he was going to do before anybody ever turned to false gods. He said, if you turn to these false gods, here are the things I'm going to do. Read Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. Read the entire Bible. It's not the first time he sent his people into captivity, and it won't be the last. He will most definitely do this to Christians who are of many different races. It doesn't have to do with race. This was a spiritual issue, not a race issue. Everything is a spiritual issue. And yes, God did send it, but not for the reason that false teacher, John Hagee, is prophesying that man will go to his destruction. You will see that he will go to his destruction. He's going to become real big, and I'm sure this is just, oh my goodness, everybody probably is exalting the heck out of him. He will go to his destruction for what he is perpetuating right now, because he did not receive that from God. Netanyahu is not at all repulsed by this extreme anti-Semite who literally justified the Holocaust. On the contrary, he continues to cozy up with Pastor Hagee, and he regularly speaks at annual Christians United for Israel conferences. I mean, his conscience is seared. What does he care? He's getting money. Both of them are making money off of this. How much money is Hagee making? What's his cut on all of the lives that are being lost right now in Palestine? He will go to his end. So he continues to cozy up with Pastor Hagee, and he regularly speaks at annual Christians United for Israel conferences, hailing the evangelicals as Israel's best friends. Of course they are. These counterfeit Christians who think that because they open their wallet and throw some money at counterfeit Israel, that they're going to be saved. Stupid. Stupid on every side, guys. Israel's best friends. They sure are. They're of the same spirit. The alliance between Netanyahu and evangelical Republicans who only support Israel as part of the pursuit of Armageddon is certainly bizarre. Yes, that's what people think of us, guys. They think of us as incredible idolaters, and they think of us as bizarre. And that is secondary to what they're doing to Christ, to what they're doing to his name. Because they can think we're idiots all day, but they think he's a joke. They think his word is a joke. All by people who were supposed to be the salt of the world, salt of the earth, and the light of the world. Great job. Great job, counterfeit Christians. Surely there is a place for them in the lake of burning sulfur. And the word so states it. Come out of Babylon. The alliance between Netanyahu and evangelical Republicans who only support Israel as part of the pursuit of Armageddon is certainly bizarre, but it may be unavoidable as more and more American Jews, particularly young Jews, lead the protests to end the genocide in Gaza. Netanyahu needs the Christian Zionists to lobby. Do you hear that? Same thing as Satan. He needs you more than you need him. Netanyahu needs the Christian Zionists to lobby the U.S. government so he can finance his war and fend off international sanctions. And in turn, Netanyahu's primary base of support in the United States is increasingly becoming a group of anti-Semites. I'm honestly so sick of that word. I mean, to be like, that's the one part of this video that, like, that's not, that doesn't, as much as I don't want to agree with John Hagee and I don't want to say anything good about him, that doesn't make him an anti-Semite. He's trying to fit something into a puzzle of, you know, and into a narrative of what God was doing, but God didn't tell him that. You could essentially say the same thing about me. You could call me an anti-Semite for saying that, but I'm telling you what God said in his word, and that God is not a liar, and that when you turn and you were his people and you turn and start serving false gods and you reform his word, I'm telling you right now, Gentile Christians who are many different ethnicities, by the way, as were Jews in Germany, hello, it's not one race. I'm telling you, you try to make God bow down to science, that's exactly what's going to happen. He goes on to say, as I record this video in May of 2024, it is true now that Netanyahu is a headache for pro-Israel Democrats in the U.S. President Biden is certainly not pleased with Israel's recent strike on Iran. Okay, let me just interject right here, because President Biden has done nothing moral in his entire presidency. And certainly God has sent this headache to President Biden during this election time, because his Democrat supporters do not support this war. So now he's caught on what to do. And this is why he's flippity-flopping. And none of it makes sense. It does not make sense that he's sending aid to Gaza while sending bombs to Israel to kill the people in Gaza. It does not make sense. Does he think that we're that stupid? But I've also told you from the beginning that Trump is going to, he's going to be in office next year. All of this that's happening right now, I realize that he's really being put through the ringer and is in court all the time. But boy, oh boy, look at the show that God is putting on right now. You have a former president who is trying to get elected again, who has cheated on his wife. We already know that. With a prostitute, essentially. I mean, it's pretty much irrefutable. What they're arguing in court is not whether or not it happened. It happened. What they're arguing in court right now is whether or not he documented it correctly and wrote it off as some sort of campaign expense, I think. But he did it. Claims to be the Christian Messiah of America. You got the current doorknob in office who just allowed absolute pagan mayhem and celebrated every minute of it, made a complete mockery of this country. Not that we don't do a well enough job of doing that ourselves, but, let's go out with a bang. It's like the firework finale of mockery. But look how God has set all of this up. I mean, he is amping up the need for vindication within Donald Trump. That man is going to have an axe to grind when he comes. Did you see every Republican nominee drop off and pave the way for Donald Trump to come into office next year just in time for the Antichrist to rise? Have you seen Joe Biden decompensate and his own party turn on him? God's doing something here, guys, and I've been telling you that this is going to happen. And it's just, I have no idea how he's going to make it happen, but to sit back and watch what he's doing is just brilliant. Like, it's brilliant. It's brilliant that Joe Biden, who had all of these pagans, LGBTQ, ABC people is what we call them, had them just partying it up on the lawn in the White House, flashing everybody, doing all of this crazy stuff, mutilating children. And then their strategies and tactics were, oh, well, you're a bigot, you're a racist, you want me to unalive myself. And then God flips the script, because we all looked at that. We were like, oh, that's nuts. That's totally nuts. And then comes October 7th. And what's the argument? What's the argument from people like Ben Shapiro, who, by the way, became quite big during that whole time of the ABC people, criticizing those who are obviously not well, day after day after day after day after day. Then October 7th happens, and these Zionists in Israel who have been tormenting Palestinians for the last 70 years, all of a sudden, the tables are turned, and he's speaking the same nonsense, the same tactics, the same strategies that those pagans were speaking a year ago. You're racist. Thank you for admitting that you want the annihilation of Jews. No, that's not true. I don't accept that just because you say it. It's not true. It's not fact. In your own word, the word you claim to believe in, God told you ahead of time. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, read it. He told you ahead of time what would happen. What God has done is brilliant in exposing these hearts, and he has said that everything will be exposed. All the blood will be exposed that has been shed in the earth. Every heart will be laid bare. What about the Zionist Christians? Never in a million years would we have thought that something like what Jesus said in the book of John would come true, that it would be relevant to us today. The very people who are going to kill you are going to claim to be doing a service to God. What are the Christian Zionists supporting, guys? Never in a million years would we have thought that, and it's right in front of our faces. Do you see it? Do you see that those calling themselves Christians support murder and claim to be doing a service to God? They're just throwing their money at it, speaking on social media, letting everybody know, I stand with Israel, I support Israel, the apple of God's eye, and they don't even know what Israel is because they don't read the word. They listen to liars and hypocrites and cowards like John Hagee. Tell them what Israel is. Tell them what the word says. And it's not even true. They don't even have the sense to understand that they are the Antichrist. The Antichrist was in the world when Jesus died. That is the spirit of the Antichrist. Many Antichrists have come. And in the very end, there is a kingdom of counterfeit Christianity, once wickedness has blossomed, that will rise and kill God's people. And you need to understand that there is an image. From the very beginning, God told you, do not go and serve idols. Do not make for yourself an image and bow down to it. There were a people who were called to himself, and they descended from Israel. Israel is not a land. They descended from Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. And they were called the Israelites. And they were saved from slavery. And they were brought into a promised land. But they were told, and Moses was told from the very beginning, Moses didn't even enter the land. He went on that hill to die. And as he climbed up that hill, God told him, they're going to prostitute themselves. And I'm going to drive them from this land that I gave them. And Moses taught them to sing a song in prophecy of what they were going to do. And they did it anyway. And they were driven from that land. The land that belonged to Israel. The land of Israel. The land is not Israel. And Paul tells us in the New Testament that not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Israel are God's people. And so in creating this idea, this fallacy, this deception, this idol, this image of what Israel is. And in Revelation 13, it says that if you don't bow down to that image, you're going to be killed. And that the United States, the false prophet, has power to give breath to that image. Has the United States given breath to that image? That is what counterfeit Christianity is worshiping right now. And these are the people who are going to kill God's people and think they are doing a service to God. All these weeks I've been seeing this, and God's been pointing things out to me, and I've been asking him, where does Israel fit in this whole prophecy? How do we understand Israel? Specifically, how do we understand this? It is the image. And that's what I'll be talking about in the next video. Please discern this message with God.